but the civil legislation is different from what you find in Europe or in other parts of the world.
And do you find that most people in the Philippines are satisfied with that, with it being dealt internally within the church?
Some are generally, in fact, some would trust the canonical process better than the civil.
Carissimi fratelli e sorelle, con profondo dolore devo annunciare la morte del nostro Santo Padre Francesco. Alle ore 7:35 di questa mattina, il Vescovo di Roma Francesco è tornato alla casa del Padre. La sua vita tutta intera è stata dedicata al servizio del Signore e della sua Chiesa.
In the heart of Rome, beneath the gilded halls of the Vatican, a hidden war once raged. One fought not with weapons, but with words, with faith, and with a desperate attempt to preserve the soul of the Church. Pope Francis, a man of paradoxes, sought to reform the ancient institution from within. But as his health declined, so too did his hope that the Church would change. Now, in the wake of his death, that story is no longer hidden. The truth long buried beneath layers of secrecy is rising to the surface. And the world is left with a question: was Pope Francis's papacy one of reform, or of thwarted potential? And more urgently, who were the men and women behind the Vatican's carefully constructed walls, who fought alongside him and against him? Pope Francis was elected to the papacy in 2013 with the promise of change that would extend beyond doctrine, reaching into the very foundations of the Church itself. A man born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, he took the name Francis, a homage to the humble saint, Francis of Assisi, known for his commitment to poverty and the poor. It was a message to the world that a new direction was coming, one that would prioritize the marginalized and the underprivileged, rather than the affluent elite. But inside the Vatican's walls, the realities of reform proved far more complicated than anyone had imagined. Beneath the centuries-old rituals and grandeur, Pope Francis encountered a church deeply enmeshed in power struggles, corruption, and institutional resistance. From financial misconduct in the Vatican's banks to the deep-rooted ties between the church and political power, the pontiff faced challenges that no one could have predicted. As Pope Francis's health began to decline in his final years, his resolve did not weaken. The man who had once preached humility and openness began to document his findings in secret. Sources close to the Pope reveal that he compiled an extensive collection of notes, letters, and personal recordings, evidence of the deep resistance he had faced within the Vatican. There was, it is said, a list, a confidential document, one that had never been made public, of bishops, cardinals, and Vatican officials whom Francis believed were actively obstructing his reforms. It was a list that detailed the names of individuals who had not only resisted change but who had also engaged in acts of sabotage, blocking investigations into financial malfeasance, clergy misconduct, and even abuse. This list, whose contents have now begun to leak into the public domain, contains some of the most powerful figures within the Church. The Black Chamber, as it's called, refers to those who controlled the Vatican's finances, real estate investments, and key decision-making. These individuals, many of whom had been placed in positions of power by previous popes, wielded their influence to protect the Vatican's wealth and status quo, regardless of the suffering it caused the faithful. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, once a quiet and diplomatic figure, became one of the first to break the silence. In an emotional speech following Pope Francis's death, Tagle revealed the personal frustration the Pope had endured from within his own curia. He spoke of how Francis's fight for reform was not just an external struggle, but an internal one, a battle against those who had once pledged their loyalty to him, but had instead resisted his vision. There were moments, Tagle said, when he wept not because the world failed to understand him, but because his own brothers in the Church rejected him. The words sent ripples through the Vatican and beyond. It was the first true public acknowledgement of the tension that had simmered behind closed doors. But it was only the beginning of a greater unraveling. As the months passed, the first leaks emerged. Documents, once hidden in the vaults of the Vatican, began to surface through various press outlets. These were not theological debates or papal encyclicals. They were financial records, correspondence between high-ranking officials, and memos discussing everything from real estate deals in London to the suppression of abuse investigations. What was revealed was staggering. The Vatican's vast financial empire had long been shrouded in secrecy, with millions if not billions of dollars funneled through complex networks of shell companies and offshore accounts. One of the most shocking revelations came from a series of documents that detailed how Vatican funds were invested in real estate deals in London, an endeavor that would later become infamous for its financial mismanagement and lack of transparency. The leaks also exposed a deep-rooted culture of cover-ups. Powerful cardinals and bishops had been involved in blocking investigations into clergy abuse, silencing victims, and protecting the perpetrators. In the wake of these revelations, Catholic communities around the world, especially in South America, began to take action. In Argentina, Pope Francis's homeland, vigils were held not just in mourning for the Pope, but for the soul of the Church itself. Parishioners held up pictures of Francis, standing in solidarity with his vision of a transparent, accountable Church. What shocked many was not just the existence of corruption within the Vatican but the lengths to which certain factions were willing to go to preserve it. One leak, a recording made during a private session, captured Pope Francis in a rare moment of despair. In it, he is heard lamenting the Vatican's entanglement with powerful political forces and its moral decay. "We were meant to shepherd souls," he said, his voice tired. "But we are guarding vaults." It was a stunning indictment of the Church's entanglement with wealth and power. The Pope's words were not just a critique of the Church's finances, they were a call to action. Francis knew that his efforts at reform were being undermined from within. He knew that the Church had become too powerful, too rich, and too focused on its own survival to listen to the needs of the faithful. Then came the most explosive piece of evidence, what insiders are calling the second dossier. This file, which was said to be compiled by Pope Francis himself during the 2013 VatiLeaks scandal, is rumored to contain details about networks of influence within the Vatican that extended far beyond financial corruption. One of the most disturbing claims was that powerful factions within the Vatican had used surveillance and even coercion to control key papal decisions. The dossier allegedly contains evidence of spies within the Vatican, including priests and cardinals who were placed in positions of power not for their faith, but for their loyalty to a shadow network that sought to maintain the status quo. These revelations, while not officially confirmed, have caused a stir among Vatican insiders. Some believe the dossier could hold the key to understanding the full extent of the Church's entanglement with secular powers. As the revelations spread, so did the backlash. Conservative elements within the Church quickly denounced the leaks as a betrayal of papal confidentiality. They accused those who spoke out of undermining the authority of the Pope and sowing discord within the Church. But others, including Pope Francis's closest allies, insisted that their actions were in obedience to his final instructions. They framed the leaks not as an act of rebellion, but as a necessary truth, one that the world and the Church could no longer ignore. Archbishop Raphael Castellucci, once a discreet figure in the Vatican, revealed in a recent interview that Francis had always known the risks of speaking out. "He said to me once, 'They may undo my work, but they cannot undo my warnings,'" Castellucci recalled. As the dust settles, one question remains: what happens next? With the death of Pope Francis, the Vatican is now at a crossroads. The College of Cardinals, many of whom owe their positions to Francis, must now choose a new pope. Will they select a figure who will silence the storm and return to the old ways? Or will they choose someone who is willing to confront the revelations and continue the Pope's mission of reform? Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle, who has become the public face of Francis's legacy, has expressed reluctance to assume the papacy. Yet many believe he may be the Church's last hope, a man who can balance tradition with reform, humility with authority. As the Vatican scrambles to contain the fallout, the world watches. For the Church is not just a place of worship. It is a symbol of power, of history, and of faith. But now, with its secrets exposed, It is also a symbol of something far more fragile: humanity's capacity for both profound change and stubborn resistance. Pope Francis may not have lived to see the full fruits of his labor, but through his silence, through his warnings, and through the voices of those he trusted, the truth is out. The Vatican may have once been a fortress, but now it stands exposed, its walls crumbling, its secrets spilling into the light. And the world is watching.